Ja, wir sind immer noch im UA 610 Studio, 610, und sind hier aber diesmal mit Flip Osman. Das ist im Endeffekt, so wie er es mir gerade gesagt hat, der Senior Software Development QA Engineer, right?
Close, yep.
That's cool. Flip, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Just a couple questions. We want to talk about, like, maybe you can describe the actual process of matching analog gear to the digital equivalents that you model here, and maybe just show us a little what it's all about. What's your thing you do, and yeah.
Okay. Well, generally, we have the studio here, so we have a good critical listening environment. What we often do is when we're going to model a piece of hardware, if it's a piece that's a modern piece, we'll get a couple units, and the algo engineer will have one unit, and I'll have one unit here. And once we are in the early stages of development, I'll get an early version of the plugin from the algo engineer, and I'll be able to pull it up against the analog hardware in here. So we'll be able to go back and forth where I'll be able to listen to it with various source material. We generally have, each of us that do this sort of work, me and Will Shanks, we both have sort of a bunch of loops that we like to use, a bunch of different types of material. Sometimes it's material that you wouldn't necessarily use. So, for instance, if it's a vocal processing channel or a mic preamp, we might find ourselves pumping some drums through it. For instance, a line level signal into a mic input, just to see what the nonlinearities are like, see what it sounds like when it's under a lot of stress. And what we find is that's where we often find where the software can diverge from the hardware. And then we take that information and we go back to the algo engineer and explain what we're hearing or what we're seeing on a scope or something like that, and then see if we can get it closer. And I've been pretty impressed actually about how close they can get it.
All right.
There was a few instances where at first I kind of figured I was pushing it a little too far. Like I wouldn't have expected them to be able to get it closer, but I went ahead and just asked anyway. And sure enough, a day later, I got a new version of the plugin that really nailed it. Even under kind of non-use case scenarios, we find is if we really push it under those circumstances, the more easier use case scenarios sort of come along for the ride. So that's what we do a lot, is we put all different types of program material, individual tracks, that sort of thing, and we do that in here. So we'll play some music through, and we'll try the hardware in all different ways.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And considering a percentage on how near you get to the real analog experience, what would you say is your average?
That's a pretty common question, actually. I think it's changed over time. I haven't been doing the sonic evaluation quite as long as for instance, Will Shanks is our plugin product manager. He was doing it solo for a long time. But I've been surprised with some of the more recent ones. We've gotten higher. I mean, I'd say, it's hard to put a percentage on things, but I'd say, I'm a recording engineer too, so I'm sort of a customer first, and so I have a lot of experience using these pieces in the studio before I came to work for UA.
Yeah.
So I have a particularly personal vested interest in it sounding right, and so some of the ones that we've done, like the 1073 preamp and EQ, that collection, the preamp, I'm pretty familiar with that. I've used it for years. I've used vintage pieces, the reissue pieces, and we have one particular vintage piece from the early 70s that we modeled, and I thought I knew that piece really well, and I was really surprised at really when I'm A-B comparing the two. I had a hard time finding places where the model broke down, and it was always under extreme non-real-world use case scenarios, like I was saying,
not
pumping
ordinary
drums, line-level drums into a mic pre, full blast, and the way that it would break up and just completely start cutting out on the hardware, just over the top, too much voltage going into it. I didn't expect Tim Silson, who did the algo on that, to come back to me with one that that did break up. Originally the plugin was breaking up like that, but not quite in the same sort of musical way. And he tweaked it, and he got much closer. So I've been pretty surprised.
That's actually cool that you bring that up, that you're kind of the customer side. I was just talking to Lev, and we were talking about that kind of musical or social stigma that was there when digital plugins first came out, and everybody's like, and considering that you with a low budget nowadays can get really high quality recordings that just in fine nuances really are to be distinguished from high end productions. But we were just talking about that kind of like I said, that stigma to it. What is your impression, or what would you say about the comparison from analog to digital? Would you, as an engineer, as an experienced engineer, what would you choose? Would you rather say, oh, if I could choose analog, I would always choose analog, or with the satisfaction that you now get from these like high 80%, mid 90%?
You know,
what would you say?
I would probably give the same answer even if I didn't work for Universal Audio. Like I've always kind of been one of those guys and I sort of came up during that transition period, you know, where I was old enough and had enough earlier experience to have used analog tape, to have tracked things on 2-inch tape. And, you know, I saw DAWs get more powerful, and I saw plugins get better and better before I came here. But even back then, you know, I tried not to get into that argument because I felt like there's room for both. You know, I used to think, hey, you know, who cares if this plugin, you know, this is before I worked for UA, I'd say, who cares if this plugin doesn't really sound like the real thing? I don't care if I can get a sound that I like out of it. If it's a reminiscent of that type of thing, I'm okay with that. And if I really want the real thing, then yeah, I'll use the analog hardware. And I think times have changed now, and computers have gotten more powerful. You know, people like the algo engineers we have here at Universal Audio have gotten much smarter. You know, that combination of the additional power that's available combined with just knowledge and experience over the years of smart guys having experience doing these sort of things, it's blurred the lines a lot more. And so, you know, I kind of, even if it wasn't as close, I would still say there's room for both. Right. But at this point now, I think, you know, even if you are a stickler for that sort of thing, where you only care if it sounds exactly like your vintage piece, because you own one and you want to use a plugin so that you can run 10 instances. You already have one, but you want to be able to run a bunch of instances without spending all this money to buy 10 more of what you have in analog world. I think even those guys are satisfied too.
That's good.
So, I mean, it's a bit of a non-answer, but I mean, I guess for me,
I know what you mean.
I've really felt like I didn't get into that argument of analog and digital, especially once digital went 24-bit and high sample rate, that, you know, I feel like you can have both. And we certainly have both here, but I have no problem using our plug-in versions even though I have the analog set right there.
Yeah, well, and probably the most essential thing is if it sounds good, it sounds good, right?
Basically, yeah. Right. I mean, that's, you know, kind of a cop-out answer, but, you know, that's,
you know what I mean.
It's true in my case. I really feel like there's room for both, and so I don't really feel the need to argue about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's it for now, I think. I think we're good. Thanks for having us. Thanks for answering the questions.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
it's great to have you guys here.
Thanks.
Thank you.